Imagine this. You are a decision maker in the aviation industry, and a disruptive event has shaken the world of aviation. Planes are stranded, assets are lost, passengers might be in danger. Your revenues are dropping from a clear sky. You are sleep deprived, trying to understand what to do to minimize the impact. I faced one of my biggest nightmares when I was the Director General of the Armenian Civil Aviation Authority. It was back in 2020. I had just given birth, returned to office. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and the 44-day war with Azerbaijan broke out. This photo really symbolizes how I had to multitask on different levels. I basically moved into the office with my baby to be able to work 24/7, taking care of all the issues and taking care of my baby. This photo also shows the arrival of a Qatar Airways aircraft bringing humanitarian aid for those affected by the war and the pandemic. This flight was delayed, and it is in these situations that you understand the importance of time. Every minute counts. As a decision maker, the sooner you know about a disruptive event, the more you can do to mitigate the risk. And specifically in our industry, geopolitical disruptions can have far-reaching consequences, whether it's human, financial, or reputational. Now let's look at an example. The Russia-Ukraine war has had a huge impact on global aviation. Basically, for obvious reason, Ukraine has closed its airspace, and a lot of airlines are not allowed to use Russian airspace because they're under sanction. And if you look on the map, Russia has quite a big airspace. So the impact of this goes way beyond Russia and Ukraine. Flights are canceled simply because they have to avoid Ukrainian and Russian airspace, because the aircraft cannot fly the distance any longer by having to avoid. Or even if the aircraft is able to fly the distance, the fuel costs increase because of the length. And it doesn't help as well that fuel costs, because of the war, has also increased significantly, year on year, 121%. If we look at the insurance costs of conflict zone related risk, that has increased a staggering 700%. Also, in Russia currently, there are 300 foreign-owned aircraft confiscated. The estimated losses of these aircraft for the aviation industry is somewhere between $6 billion and $15 billion. To compare it with another very disruptive event for the aviation sector, the World Trade Center, the losses expected from the Russia-Ukraine war are 7 times the size of the World Trade Center. Now let's look at the impact on Armenia. The Russia-Ukraine war could have had a very, very big impact on Armenia. It could have put us in a very difficult situation. Basically, because Ukraine closed its airspace, Armenia lost more than 600 flights a year to Ukraine. Before COVID and before the Russia-Ukraine war, 70% of the traffic from Armenia went to Russia. Politics aside, this type of dependency is highly problematic for any country. I'm happy to say that our team at the Civil Aviation Authority made a huge effort to diversify traffic before the war started. So that meant we attracted major European airlines to Armenia like Lufthansa, Wizz Air, Eurowings. So that helped decrease this dependency from 70% to 29%. And it is not because the traffic to Russia has decreased. No, actually, it has significantly increased because of the war, because Armenia has become a hub for Russians flying. The total traffic of Armenia, if we look at pre-COVID numbers, have grown 65%. This puts Armenia as the second fastest growing aviation market within the Eurocontrol zone, which is basically all European countries and neighboring states of Europe, 40 countries in total. Now, imagine if we had known that the Russia-Ukraine war would break out. The decision to diversify traffic wouldn't have been a lucky decision. It would have been a deliberate act. And this is why I decided to join Osprey Flight Solutions. This is a UK-based company, an industry leader within predicting geopolitical risk and predicting overflight risk in general near and over conflict zones. I brought with you 3 examples that I hope are relevant for the audience today, where we've been able to predict geopolitical disruptions before they took place. And one of the examples are the recent September escalations in Nagorno-Karabakh. Our AI anomaly detection system detected the first changes in the security situation in Nagorno-Karabakh 8 days before. We were so confident that it would start that 8 hours before we raised the risk rating of the airspace. If we look at the Russia-Ukraine war, the first indicators happened 4 months before the war broke out. 6 weeks before, we published an alert clearly stating an invasion will happen in the near term, or likely will happen in the near term. 6 hours before we stated it will happen. And the final example is of the tragic shootdown of Ukraine International Airlines in Iran during takeoff in 2020. 2 weeks prior the aircraft being shut down, Osprey raised its rating to high for Iranian airspace, and then 3 hours before to extreme, simply advising airlines not to fly. So this shows that AI can help us predict geopolitical disruptions and basically make sure that decision makers are aware and can make proactive decisions to mitigate risk. However, although our next generation technology is available for the aviation industry to use, the disheartening truth is that a lot of airlines have been caught by surprise by these events. Basically, the way the industry works today is they largely rely on government statements. Government statements, however, tend to be outdated, incomplete, or simply politically biased. The statement you can see here on the slide is a statement made by the US Aviation Authority, an authority that is considered a leading authority within aviation globally. But even they are stating that it is not possible for them to follow the rapid changes and provide timely enough information. And by timely, it's important to understand that airlines should fly right until it is no longer possible. Not too early, not too late, just timely. So what can we learn from this? That even if leading aviation authorities globally are not able to provide timely enough information for the aviation industry to make decisions, well, what about the rest of the world? Now, I don't want you to be scared of flying. That's not the idea of this presentation. A lot of efforts have been put into place to close these gaps within overflight risk. And at Osprey, we don't only invest in technology to solve these issues, we also invest in education. Last month, we organized the World Overflight Risk Conference in Warsaw. And this conference was organized by Osprey, by European Aviation Safety Agency, and Southampton University. The goal with this conference was together to identify existing gaps, but also to discuss how technology can help to solve those gaps. I was moderating the government session, and here you can see that we had representation from the Aviation Authority in the US, UK, France, and the European Commission. So basically the leading people within overflight risk. And this was quite a unique situation for me to be in, because when I went through we all went through the 44-day war, I gained operational experience on how to manage the airspace effectively. And it was concluded by the EU authorities that we were managing the risk effectively for the region. The key message from this panel was, government statements must be followed or listened to. However, they cannot be the only source of information that airlines should use when making a decision to fly or not to fly. Our innovative tool at Osprey harnesses open source intelligence. And today, this is considered to be a golden standard within intelligence circles. Basically, our technology goes in and scans 250,000 sources consistently, translates the data from 60 different languages, geolocates the events, and most importantly, understands when there is a change in the situations. Basically, it identifies patterns, trends, and anomalies in large data sets. Sometimes when we look at predictions or hear about it, we think this might be some type of magic or dark arts, but it's actually not. When we look in hindsight, there are always clear leading indicators that a situation is about to escalate. The challenge is that when we do it as humans, we simply cannot identify these leading indicators within a large mass of data and noise. However, the good news is that computers are extremely good at identifying these anomalies. And this is what helps our human analysts to be able to do correct predictions. I think you're going to be surprised, but our predictions are 98% correct. And by 98%, what I mean is that the event takes place, but it also takes place within the time frame that we have suggested. The remaining 2% of events still take place, but we consider it inaccurate if we haven't, or we've been a little bit off on the timing of it. Not sure why the slide doesn't work, not important. So my favorite tool at Osprey is called Pulse. So this is just to give you an example of a practical tool that airlines can use in their risk assessments. Basically, whether you're an airline having 2 routes that you conduct or you have 1,000 routes, what you can do is you can upload all your routes into the system, and then the system automatically risk assesses every single flight, origin airport, destination airport, and every single airspace that the aircraft is traveling through on 3 different flight levels. And then the system understands what risk category to put on each route. So extreme risk, high risk, moderate, or low. And this continues on a consistent basis. So if there is a sudden situation where the aircraft is already in the air and it was considered a low-risk flight before it took off, but suddenly there was a change in the situation and that flight became a high risk, the system will identify that in near real time and inform the decision makers about it. So instead of decision makers coming to work and trying to do all the heavy lifting of understanding what is going on in the world manually, or waiting for these outdated government statements, they know exactly what is going on, and they can basically spend their efforts and their time on making decisions to mitigate the risk. Osprey Flight Solutions work with a variety of partners. Basically, we are the data provider or intelligence provider to all European governments and all European airlines. We also provide intelligence to the Transport Security Agency in the US, to insurance companies that are providing insurance to the aviation industry, to ICAO, which is the main body regulating global aviation, but also we work with airlines beyond Europe like Emirates, Qatar Airways, Air India, Singapore Airlines, Delta, American, just to mention a few examples. And what motivates me the most about Osprey is that it's not biased, in the sense that small countries like Armenia can also get access to the exact same data as the US, the UK, France, and so forth. I hope this was useful. Thank you so much, and I'm around here for questions.